welcome. Here we go. It's that time again. Matt Connarton Unleashed, and we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in glorious, bright, sunny downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Also on Comcast 97 if you're in Manchester. Streaming at WMNHradio.org and on the Facebook on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. And hello to our friends at Raw Talk Online. Charles Richardson, I do see you in the Facebook live chat. Hello. And today is Wednesday, June 16, 2021. And I apologize if I sound a bit raspy. My allergies are, this is the peak time for my allergies to really just kick myself in the groin over and over. Well, more in my sinuses, I should say, to be more precise. But my goodness, everything is in bloom, and it looks very, very nice. But it's making things difficult on me. Fortunately, and I'm sure some of you can relate, fortunately, this is kind of the peak of it usually, like, you know, mid to end of June. For me, anyway, this is when I get the most sniffly, the most sneezy, and then things begin to even out a little bit until the fall, of course, when the ragweed emerges, and then I go through it all over again. But my goodness, I'll tell you. But anyway, there are worse things. There are much, much worse things. But yeah, so here we are. Of course, I do want to remind you we are proudly sponsored by the Hop Knot in the Facebook, in the in the Brady Sullivan, not the Facebook. We'll say hello to everybody in a moment in the Facebook live chat, but in the Brady Sullivan right across the street at 1000 Elm Street, they are open today, as they're open Wednesday through Sunday. They have delicious gourmet pretzels, they have craft beer, they have wine. They've got Thursday nights, a trivia night with the great Bill Cini. Friday nights, our friend Grant Lampton, also known as Mike Sudderth. He was here with us on the show yesterday. Grant is doing a residency there. He's playing there Friday nights. They have Sunday brunch. And this coming weekend, too, they have the big Juneteenth celebration on Saturday. There's the big scavenger hunt going on downtown that many businesses are participating in. Grant Lampton is also donating his time for that. He'll be playing live, as well as Panubian Drums? They'll be performing. Kenny was here on Monday, if you missed it, on Monday's show. Kenny from the Hop Knot joined us live in studio, and we had a great discussion. It had been a while since Kenny was on, so we had a great discussion about everything that's coming up. They're just doing so much great stuff. I always say about the Hop Knot, great food, great service, and a great family that owns and operates it. So we love Kenny and Trudy and everybody over there at the Hop Knot, and we're very honored and privileged to have them as a sponsor. Such a wonderful business to be associated with. And they're really, too, they continue to make all sorts of connections here in the community, and it's really great with other businesses. And, of course, their clientele continues to grow, and it's just a wonderful thing. So we're very grateful for that. And I did mention yesterday, Mike Sudderth, also known as Grant Lampton, was here. He was here as Mike Sudderth. He's joining us Tuesday afternoons now in the second hour for a new segment called Tweakonomics, as Mike has a background in economics, and it's fun to learn and talk with him. So I think he's going to be popping in a little bit early on Friday as well, so that he can promote his appearance at the Hop Knot. Speaking of Friday, by the way, of course, Friday nights here at WMNH, I have the honor and privilege of being Paulie C's co-host, along with our friend Dan Randlett on Retro Spectrum Radio. We were off last Friday, but it does return live this coming Friday at 7:30 p. So we look forward to that. Paul did call in yesterday, and we chatted a bit about that. So lots of great stuff going on. Today was a big day, big day, so much to talk about, and yet, not really that much to talk about. I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment, if you don't already get my meaning. If you don't catch my drift, which I think the young people say that now, if I'm not mistaken. They talk about catching my drift. I don't really know what that means. I know drifting is something you do with cars, I think, or something. I don't know. But anyway, or maybe it's maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it's draft, like if you catch my draft, like if I leave leave a window open or something and there's a terrible draft. You know, when I was a kid, one of my earliest memories is of my mother. She would give me a bath She'd give me a bath in the tub, of course. I was too big for the kitchen sink. She'd give me a bath in the tub, and, she'd get up and she'd leave the room, and she'd let me soak in the tub for a bit. And I noticed she would always shut the door when she went to leave the room. And then there was one night she was giving me my bath, and the phone rang. So she was in a hurry to get the phone, so she got up and left the room. And she forgot to close the door. But, I had asked her once, I said, why do you always close the door when you leave the room? And she said it was to keep out the draft. But I was just a little kid. I misunderstood. I thought she was saying to keep out the giraffe. So the time that she got up and ran out of the room to get the phone and forgot to close the door, I'm sitting there in the tub waiting for a giraffe to show up, which wouldn't have worked spatially, because we could not have fit I don't remember how high the ceilings were, but probably not very high. I don't think a giraffe would have fit. But I do love giraffes. They're very graceful. If you watch them, the way they walk, the way they always look like they're moving in slow motion. Even when they're eating, like you see them munching on a tree, but it looks like they're really chewing their food. So I do love giraffes. But today, like I said, a very, very big day. If you would like to give us a call, you can, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. You can also text us at 617-917-4476. Tweet me at Matt Connarton, or send an email to matt@mattconnerton.com. And, of course, you can opine and interact in the Facebook live chat. But the best thing to do so that we can hear and enjoy your dulcet tones is give us a call at 603-250-6007. I do want to discuss, of course, the Biden-Putin summit. We will talk about that. But let's take a moment first and say hello to everybody in the Facebook live chat. Charles Richardson, I did mention, is in the chat room. He says, hey there, good afternoon. Charles, of course, also the host of the Charles Richardson Show, which is every Wednesday and Friday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Of course, you can see that on social media, but also at Raw Talk. I think it's rawtalkonlinenetwork.com. Is that the new URL, Charles? Please drop a link to that in the chat room if I have it wrong, or even if I have it right, just so people know how to find your wonderful program. Mike Palapita joins us. Mike says, hi, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. Mike, of course, from another one of our wonderful sponsors here at WMNH 95.3, Queen City Cabinetry in the historic Sunbeam Mall. Wayne Noel is a top fan all the way from Michigan and says, afternoon, everyone. Mike Palapita said, this is awesome, referring to, of course, that wonderful clip I played from The Onion. I do love The Onion. That was actually from 2012, but in some ways relevant today. Joe Friday says, good afternoon, gentlemen. Just want to let you know I saw Eric, our friend Easy G, with his orange T-shirt walking down the street with his walker, one-handing it. He was looking good. Yes. Well, at the Relay for Life recently that Jenny and I attended to support our friend Easy G, during the actual relay going around the course, Eric was one-handing it then. He had one hand on the walker and his other hand swinging free as I've never seen someone move so fast. Well, that's not true, like Usain Bolt and people like that, but I've seen people actually move much faster, but I don't think I'd ever seen anyone move quite so fast with a walker. Joe Friday also says they are by far my favorite animal, I assume referring to giraffes. Why didn't thought it was the Poutine? Oh, the Poutine Summit. He was over at Chez Vachon. Poutine, yes, I've never had poutine. By the way, funny thing, and for those of you listening online who are not from the city of Manchester, you might not know this, but Chez Vachon refers to a restaurant here. It is obviously a French name. However, if you try to go there and you're not sure exactly where Chez Vachon is, and you use Google Maps, you may notice that the GPS pronounces it Chez Vachon, which is kind of fun. Let's see. Let me give the number one more time, 603-250-6007. And I want to talk about today. Today, a very big day in the Biden presidency and, of course, in terms of foreign policy. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to sniffle like that into the mic. I was trying to mute myself and I mistimed it. My allergies are so bad. Jenny asked me earlier, she said, "Are you sure you're not sick?" I said, "No, I'm sure. I go through this every June." It's like I said on Facebook, I think it was yesterday, I feel like someone somehow injected pollen directly into my sinuses. Oh, boy. Anyway, so today was the big Biden-Putin summit. And the reason I said, there's so much to talk about, but in a way, not really much at all, is because it's all pretty predictable. There were no really big surprises that I can think of. The only thing that might be, not as far as specifics, but just in a broader sense, the tone and tenor in terms of Putin was relatively positive, it would seem, and Biden too, although I kind of expected that from him regardless. But, Putin, when being, in his press conference, they had separate press conferences. They did not do a joint conference like Trump and Putin did. Some of you might remember that, the Trump and Putin together in Helsinki, where the president of the United States, very unique moment in history. As far as I know, it was the only time in American history where a president of the United States has publicly sided with a foreign leader, an adversary, against our own intelligence agencies. I try not to use the T word, but, it's pretty, no, not to be too harsh on Trump about that. Granted, yes, he did side with Putin against our own intelligence agencies. But, he did clear it up eventually. He said something about, when I said I don't see, when he was asked about Putin being responsible for interference in our election, and Trump said, well, he very strongly denied it, and I don't see any reason why it would be why it would have been Russia, or why it would be Russia. And then he later clarified and said, no, what I meant is, and by later I mean like days later, when talking to the media, he said something about, I meant I have no reason to think it wouldn't be. I meant to say wouldn't instead of would. But I'm clearing that up for you, even though I would have thought it would have been obvious to everybody, because it's always the media's fault. So, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Thanks for clearing that up. Because it's not like it's important to be precise about these things. Oh, God, I don't miss that. Anyway, I like how boring and predictable today was. No, it wasn't boring. Definitely not boring. Predictable, yes. Boring, no. I am fascinated by these matters. Growing up, I was very preoccupied with the Cold War, and it remains to this day the most fascinating thing in American history is the Cold War, which, of course, sprawled out over decades. And if I were to pinpoint the particular moment or event within the Cold War that I'm particularly fascinated by and always have been, and I try to read everything I can about it and watch everything I can about it, that would be the Cuban Missile Crisis. Absolutely fascinating to me. I am glad, however, that it happened before I was born. You'll often hear people talk about history and particular historical events, and they'll talk about how, I'm so fascinated by this. I wish I could go back in time and experience what it was like to live through that. No, not me. Not me. I am perfectly content not to have experienced what it was like to be walking around with the knowledge that at any given moment, Armageddon might take place and we all might be incinerated. I am perfectly fine viewing that event through the eyes of history and not having had to view that event through my own. I've talked to people about it. You know what's odd? I've talked to people about it who are old enough to remember it. And I'm always a bit surprised when people are like, well, it was a little unsettling and whatnot. It's like, a little unsettling? it could have been nuclear war at any moment. This is true. I've never had a conversation with someone where they were like, oh my God, I was terrified that at any moment it might all go up. We might all burn up. I've never had that conversation with anyone. Everyone's always either like, yeah, it was kind of unsettling, or, I didn't even really think about it much. It's like, what? But from my perspective, and again, this is definitely part of why the Cold War is so fascinating to me. I grew up in the 80s, and I grew up with a very unhealthy obsession, might be too strong a word, but a very unhealthy preoccupation with the prospect of nuclear war. I worried about it a lot. My parents let me stay up. I remember when The Day After aired on network television. Those of you from my generation or older will remember the television movie The Day After. And, my parents let me stay up to watch it. They thought it was important, if I wanted to see it. I don't know if it was the right choice on their part or not. I'm certainly not critiquing it, but at the time I definitely wanted to see it. But it did nothing to allay my fears, especially if you've ever seen The Day After, or if you saw it back then when it aired on television. You might even recall that at the end of the film, there's a disclaimer that scrolls up the screen, which basically says, as awful as what you saw in this film is, in terms of a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union, because at that time it was the Soviet Union, as awful as it is depicted here, in reality, if it ever actually happens, it'll be, 20 times worse. Because we have enough nuclear weapons between us and Russia, the Russian Federation, to destroy the world several times over, which is why it is so important to have some sort of, we've been hearing the word predictability a lot in terms of our relationship with Russia and what the Biden administration was hoping to accomplish with this summit and ongoing interactions, predictability, stability, things like that. Accountability in terms of cyber attacks. So everything today was, like I said, it was fairly predictable. I guess, in a way, they did achieve what they set out to achieve. And not just the Biden administration using those terms. Actually, I think we heard the term accountability a lot out of the Biden administration and out of the president going into this. But I've heard Vladimir Putin himself use the term predictability, wanting a more predictable, stable relationship with the West, which ultimately benefits everyone. But it is so very important, and I talked about this on the show recently. Sager and Jetty, who is personally my favorite conservative in all of media, because I think he's intellectually honest, and I'm not a conservative, so I disagree with him on some things. I actually agree with him on some things, though, too. I'm not as liberal as everyone thinks I am. I know I spent 4 years trashing Trump every day, so everyone thinks I'm this super left AOC-loving liberal. There are things there, I am liberal on some issues, but I'm actually pretty centrist. But, but I did spend a lot of time over the last 4 years trashing Trump. Yes, again, you go back to Helsinki when I see the president of the United States siding with Vladimir Putin against our own intelligence agencies. There's not a lot, doesn't leave me with a lot of positive things to say. Anyway, but the thing that we must always remember, and this was mentioned in the joint statement that was released by the Biden administration and by Putin and Putin's team, is, nuclear, the threat of nuclear war. It was mentioned in the joint statement. Now, the joint statement was very short because, and actually I should pull it up. The joint statement was very short because the joint statement was emphasizing ways in which the two countries could work together. Let me put it this way. Let me rephrase that. in terms of where there was some agreement and alignment. And there isn't a lot of that, really. Here's what the statement was. This was issued a couple hours ago, and it's up on whitehouse.gov. We, President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, and President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, note the United States and Russia have demonstrated that, even in periods of tension, they are able to make progress on our shared goals of ensuring predictability in the strategic sphere, reducing the risk of armed conflicts and the threat of nuclear war. Now, there's two more short paragraphs here. Again, it's terse, but the first paragraph, you almost never see publicly the words or that phrase nuclear war or threat of nuclear war. You almost never see that. It's almost taboo to say those words out loud if you're in government. But it's also a stark reminder of what's at stake here. Next to the United States, Russia, the Russian Federation, has the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world. And it is worth reminding, I mentioned Sager and Jetty earlier. So Sager was commenting recently on his old show because now he and Crystal Ball are co-hosting a new show together. But Sager was sort of lamenting that we, the United States, take Russia far too seriously. In his view, he referred to Russia as a failing petrol state. In other words, well, yeah, petrol state, they have a lot of oil. So economically, they're very important in that sense. But militarily, strategically, et cetera, we get nervous if they start amassing troops different places. Many in the United States were apoplectic over Putin annexing Crimea from Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. And he was making the point that we shouldn't be so worried about Russia because they are a failing petrol state. And I've often talked about on the show how I think that Sager, again, even though I respect him and he is my favorite conservative in media, because I do believe he's intellectually honest, and I value his opinions and insights, he's got this one totally wrong. And everyone, in my opinion, who fails to take Russia seriously gets this one completely wrong. Because you can call them a failing petrol state. You can talk about their economy being in a shambles all you want to. You can, you can diminish, you can talk about their diminished role in the world and how sometimes, these things that they do that seem like provocations, there's almost a desperation to them. You can talk about all of that, but it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, and to put it in the starkest possible terms, that at the end of the day, they still, failing petrol state or not, they still have the capability to incinerate large parts of the United States in less time than it takes to have a pizza delivered once those missiles are in the air. That is a fact. So we can be dismissive as much as we want to, but it doesn't change the reality. And this first paragraph sums that up perfectly, and it reminds us. This is the last part of the last sentence, reducing the risk of armed conflicts and the threat of nuclear war. That, by the way, is part of why I so desperately wanted us out of Syria. And why I was so alarmed back in 2016 when several Republicans in the Republican primary and in the Democratic primary, we had Hillary Clinton also talking about putting a no-fly zone over Syria. Terrified me. The notion of it's insane to me. I remember during one of the Republican debates in 2016, and by the way, credit where it's due, Trump actually was right about this. Not the part about getting out of Syria. Well, he was right about that too, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and he did it the wrong way, even though it was a good idea. like I always say, you can have a good idea, you can have a great idea, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you choose to execute your idea in the most clumsiest, ham-fisted way possible, then is your good idea really so good? But Trump also, was not interested in putting a no-fly zone over Syria. And I remember a moment during one of the debates, it was actually Rand Paul who started shaking his head when, the question came up, what if you put up a no-fly zone and a Russian plane flies into the no-fly zone? What do you do? And of course, they're Republicans, right? So they all have to out-alpha each other, and they all have to show off how tough they are. And so, they start saying things like Marco Rubio and Chris Christie. I think it was Chris Christie who goes, would I shoot that plane down? Damn right I'd shoot it down. And then they pan the camera over to Rand Paul. And by the way, I have very little positive to say about Rand Paul these days and haven't for quite a while now. But he was right. Rand Paul was right about this. They pan the camera over to Rand, and he's standing there shaking his head in disbelief at what he's hearing. And he says, you people are going to get us all killed. Why? Because you shoot down a Russian plane. I get nervous any interactions like this with the Russians, but you shoot down a Russian plane, ooh, no-fly zone or not, they have to respond to that. And then we have to respond to their response, and then they have to respond to that. And then it escalates and escalates. And where it ultimately escalates is none of us want to go, because where it ultimately escalates to is we end up all dead. Okay? So, we need to keep that in mind. That's the thing. We always need to keep that in mind. So there's two more paragraphs to this very terse statement. It also says here, again, this is the joint statement from the White House and from Russia. The recent extension of the New START treaty exemplifies our commitment to nuclear arms control. Today, we reaffirm the principle that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. Again, striking in that these are not things anyone ever says out loud, but they're being said out loud in this statement. And I'm glad. They're frightening things to think about, but I'm glad they're being, because, I want people taking this very seriously. Last paragraph. Consistent with these goals, the United States and Russia will embark together on an integrated bilateral strategic stability dialogue in the near future that will be deliberate and robust. Through this dialogue, we seek to lay the groundwork for future arms control and risk reduction measures. Again, I like that. Melanie in the chat room says, Putin is BS crazy. Well, not BS means something else. Bat crap. I can edit it that way. Putin is bat crap crazy. Is he? I don't know about that. I hope not. I hope not, because I don't want a crazy person in charge of the second largest nuclear stockpile in the world. That's for sure. I don't know that he is. Feel free to expand on that, Melanie, in the chat if you'd like to. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Putin's a bad guy. I think he's a killer. Apparently so does Joe Biden. Apparently so does Trump. But I think we all know that, right? Crazy like a fox, Mike Pelopita says. Yeah, you might be onto something there. Jenny also joins us in the chat room and says shalom. Yeah, I don't know if Putin is crazy, but he's very dangerous. He is absolutely very dangerous. All right, we're going to do something a little bit unusual. Usually we wait till the top of the hour to take a break, play a couple songs, and then show some love to our sponsors. We're actually going to take a break now. And the reason we're going to take a break now is because we are, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we are in peak allergy season for me. This is when my allergies are at their worst, middle to the end of June. And for that reason, as I sit here today, I find myself in this moment desperately needing to blow my nose. So we will take a break now, and I will do that. We'll play something, show some love to our sponsors, and we will be back with more. Don't go anywhere. Matt Connarton Unleashed coming up. Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's Matt Connarton Unleashed, and we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. Also on Comcast 97 if you're in Manchester. Streaming at WMNHradio.org, as well as the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. Hello to our friends at Raw Talk Online, and of course, welcome all of you. If you'd like to give me a call, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617-917-4476. Tweet me at Matt Connarton or send an email to matt@mattconnerton.com. And sorry if I sound a little rough. Again, I am not sick. If you're just joining us, just my allergies are really, really bad. It is peak allergy time at Everything is in Bloom. Oh, boy. I'll get through it. Hey, it could be worse. It could be worse. Anyway, we were discussing, of course, the big day today, the first Putin-Biden summit. Or I should say Biden-Putin. I should put our own president first, shouldn't I? Somehow Putin-Biden, though, flows a little bit better, rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. Something about putting the P before the B. But Melanie in the chat room was saying, Melanie was saying earlier before the break about how, she thinks Putin is crazy. Melanie clarifies, I just don't think he cares what he needs to do to retain power, so no boundaries to possible action, bat crap crazy. So not insane, just a complete sociopath. I'm going to be cracking up about the bat crap all night. No idea why, but I find it funny. Yes. Well, that's what you say when you can't say the other thing on FM terrestrial radio. Let's see. So getting back to this. So like I said earlier, I think that no big surprises other than the tone coming out of this may have been a little bit more positive than I was expecting, at least from Putin's side. I was expecting President Biden to put an optimistic face on it, but Vladimir Putin seemed to as well. But I can tell you, and the arms control stuff is reassuring. Something that I think is probably a bit of a disappointment to the president and the administration is apparently no headway made at all regarding Alexei Navalny, who is probably, Biden has said that if Navalny dies in prison where he is reportedly being tortured and Putin, acts like, oh, it's, not my problem, not my fault. I'm not involved. Whatever happens to him, happens to him. He broke the law, multiple laws. He's a violent guy. I don't know of any evidence to suggest that he was a violent guy, but he is, or he was at one point, Putin's biggest political adversary. But Putin kind of acts like, it's not. Don't blame me. It's not me. Biden at one point had said, there will be consequences if Alexei Navalny is allowed to die in prison. If he's allowed to be tortured to death in prison, there will be consequences for that. From a human rights perspective, that's terrible. It doesn't sound like any progress was made on that at all. Putin would not even in his press conference afterward with the media, Putin wouldn't even say Navalny's name. I don't know if he's ever spoken his name in public. Won't even say his name, just refers to him as, the gentleman who's in prison, whatever. So no progress made there at all, it would seem. Biden seemed to frame things as, and by the way, it was shorter than people expected. The entirety of the meeting. I think it was only about 3 hours. People thought it would be longer. But Biden seemed to frame things as it was a success because he was able to communicate to Vladimir Putin directly, person to person, in person, that there will be consequences if the Russian Federation continues to execute or give comfort and aid to those who, from Russia, continue to execute these cyber attacks on America and American interests, that there will be consequences for that, and you cannot continue to do that. I can't remember. I don't remember. Now, I might have missed something. I don't remember Biden talking about in his talking with the press afterwards, specifically about interference in our elections, specifically, but I might have just missed something. But there was a lot of talk, as the president indicated, about cybersecurity. There was talk about both sides working together to strengthen cybersecurity. But again, arms control. And there were some other things, too, I'm sure I'm forgetting. We'll look at that a little bit closer with this Reuters article. But Biden seemed to frame it as it's a success because Biden got to sit down with Putin and tell him directly, face to face, if you do certain things, we will respond. The only other tangible thing that seemed to be accomplished, again, that's not to be dismissive of like I said, Biden getting to tell Putin, look, we're serious about A, B, and C, and we will respond with X, Y, and Z if you do these things. But the only other really tangible thing that can be executed immediately is the return of the ambassadors to their posts. Both the United States and Russia called home at one point ambassadors, and they will be reinstated and reinstalled in their posts. And that's a positive thing. Of course, we want to have that. You always want to have multiple lines of communication. That's something that we learned from the Cuban Missile Crisis. In fact, you always want to have multiple lines of communication, and you want to at least have some sort of diplomatic mechanism in place, which, again, helps keep things from spiraling out of control. The other thing, too, I almost forgot this. This is important. One other tangible thing that may have come out of today is hopefully we're going to get, there's two, right? If I'm not mistaken, two American citizens that are currently held prisoner by Russia who will hopefully be returned to us. Putin had said something about, when asked about that by the media, something about, that's something we can work on, sounding, he didn't commit to anything. Unlike with the ambassadors, where he was pretty, I think, clear that, yes, we're going to return these diplomats to their posts. That he was clear on. But as far as, as far as the returning those prisoners, that was not, he was a little bit non-committal, just kind of indicating that that's something that they could work on and cooperate on. So hopefully that happens. That's very, very important. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, this is from Reuters. Biden pointedly asks Putin about cyber attacks at summit. It says here, U.S. President Joe Biden asked Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday how he would feel if someone carried out a ransomware attack on Russian oil pipelines, a pointed question during their summit that illustrated the breadth of their disagreements. Let's see. Sorry. The query referred to a cyber attack that closed the Colonial Pipeline. Everyone remembers that. Just a few weeks ago. The Colonial Pipeline system for several days in May, preventing millions of barrels of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel from flowing to the U.S. East Coast from the Gulf Coast. Both leaders described their first summit in a lakeside Swiss villa as professional rather than friendly, and said they agreed to hold lower-level talks on cybersecurity and arms control and to send their ambassadors back to their capitals. But there was no hiding the differences on issues such as human rights, where Biden said the consequences for Russia would be devastating if jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny died, or cyberspace, where Washington has demanded Moscow crack down on ransomware attacks emanating from Russian soil. while saying he had not made any threats to Putin in their talks, because that was a question, by the way, to Biden. I don't remember who asked it, but someone asked him. And the question, the way it hit my ears when I heard it was a little odd, but the question was, were there any threats made or provocations during the meeting, which I don't know why, but maybe it shouldn't have surprised me a little bit, but it did. Anyway, while saying he had not made any threats to Putin in their talks, which a senior U.S. official said had lasted about 3 hours, Biden said he had posed a theoretical question to his Russian counterpart about the dangers of cyber attacks. Quote, I looked at him and said, come on, man. No, I'm sorry, I made that part up. I looked at him and said, how would you feel if ransomware took on the pipelines from your oil fields? He said it would matter, unquote, Biden told reporters at a solo news conference, itself an illustration of the tensions between the two nations. Biden said he told Putin critical infrastructure should be off limits to cyber attacks, saying the list of organizations that should be off limits included 16 sectors that he did not identify. Speaking to reporters earlier, Putin showed little appetite for compromise, dismissing Washington's concerns about Navalny, about Russia's increased military presence near Ukraine's eastern border, and about U.S. suggestions that unnamed Russians were responsible for cyber attacks in the U.S. Putin, 68, called Biden, 78, a constructive, experienced partner, and said they spoke, quote, the same language. Not literally true, of course, but added that there had been no friendship, rather a pragmatic dialogue about their two countries' interests. Biden said he had told Putin, quote, we need some basic rules of the road that we can all abide by. The separate news conferences meant there were none of the joviality that accompanied a 2018 meeting in Helsinki between Putin and Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump, where Putin gave Trump a soccer ball. There was also no shared meal. In a joint statement issued after the news conferences, the two sides said the meeting showed they were able to make progress on shared goals, and even in periods of tension, the U.S. and Russia will embark on an integrated bilateral strategic stability dialogue to lay the groundwork for future arms control and risk reduction measures, it said, saying the talks would begin in the near future. That basically sums it up, although, again, there's nothing in the article about those prisoners. But some people, I noticed, had expressed concern. There was concern in the media about, when prior to their interactions with the press individually, that the meeting was only 3 hours. I guess people expected it to last longer, and some people felt like that was a bad sign. If the meeting was only 3 hours, that it may have ended prematurely, that Putin may have been uncooperative, that it may not have been constructive. But it sounds like it was about as constructive as you could expect. But when I saw that, and when I heard people first speculating about, while the meeting might have been too short, I was immediately reminded, and if you're just joining us, I was talking at the top of the show about how, I was very concerned about the threat of nuclear war growing up. And I had this memory of, and I remember this so vividly, the first time that President Ronald Reagan, what year was it? It was in the 80s, obviously. I want to say 84. I'm not sure. The first time that President Ronald Reagan went to meet, I don't know if it was the first time, but one of the first times that Reagan went to meet with, at that time, Soviet premier, is that what we called him then? Mikhail Gorbachev, to discuss arms control. I really wanted it to go well, as everyone did, and eventually it did. But they met in Reykjavik, Iceland, for one of these first meetings. It might have been the first meeting, and it did not go well. Because if you're old enough to remember, or if you just know your history, you might know that Reagan talked a lot about Star Wars, but not the movie Star Wars, not the movie franchise. Star Wars, also known as SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative. And this was Reagan's idea that there would be satellites in space that would shoot with lasers any incoming nuclear missiles, and it would give us an umbrella of protection. So this was something that Reagan had championed. He talked about it a lot. I remember his in '84, his series of debates with his opponent, Democratic nominee for the presidency, Walter Mondale, who talked about, now Reagan wants to extend our arms race to the heavens. But this was something that Reagan was trying to use as a bargaining chip. And apparently what happened, well, what I remember about this is he goes to Reykjavik, Iceland for the meeting with Gorbachev, and it ends very early. It was supposed to be a multi-day thing. And I think on the first day, they ended it early, and I was like, oh no. And I remember being in a convenience store the next morning before school. I stopped at a convenience store, and I see it was on all the newspapers was a picture of Reagan getting into the limousine, his presidential limousine, or whatever car they had for him in Reykjavik. And he had a scowl on his face. And it was a picture of him leaving the meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev. And he had a scowl, an expression that you didn't see much on Ronald Reagan. He usually, he smiled a lot. He had that sunny optimism. But he was scowling as he's getting into the car. And what had happened was, apparently he was pretty angry and discouraged because from what I've read, what happened in that meeting was it was going really well. It was almost going too well because he and Mikhail Gorbachev were negotiating the reduction, the actually dismantling and destroying existing stockpiles of nuclear weapons. They were negotiating this massive drawdown of nuclear weapons, and it was going really well, almost too good to be true. And Reagan was impressed with how cooperative Gorbachev was and how willing he was to do this and to commit to it. And then, out of nowhere, when they've made all these agreements, they're gonna dismantle all these weapons. Gorbachev turns to Reagan and says, "Of course, everything that I've agreed to here today is contingent on you abandoning SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, because the Russians opposed it." So he says that to Reagan with a smile on his face. He says this to Reagan. This is all contingent on you abandoning SDI. And completely caught Reagan off guard. It was a punch in the gut, a kick in the groin, And Reagan lost his temper and said, "Nope, you've been negotiating in bad faith. You agreed to all this. Now you throw this at me. Forget it." And they walked. Which kind of freaked people out because, and it freaked me out. I remember that vividly. I remember that the image of that picture on the cover of all the newspapers that next day, it's seared in my memory. Now, we all know the story. Eventually, they had more talks, they had more summits, and it went very well. And Gorbachev ended up being very willing to work with Reagan on reducing arms. But that first meeting did not go well. And that was what I thought of when I saw that this meeting with Biden and Putin, which was expected to go much longer, it only went 3 hours. I thought, uh-oh, did this go badly? Apparently it didn't go badly. So, Melanie in the chat room says they were Jewish lasers at that time too. No, I don't think so. Pete Trouble Morse says, you say Reagan maybe even had egg on his face? Ah, well done, sir. Yes. I think Reagan might have had a little bit of egg on his face. That's right. Not as much as our friend Easy G, of course, though. Nobody has more egg on his face than Easy G. Which reminds me, a quick programming note before we take a break, our top of the hour break. Easy G will be here tomorrow with his entertainment report. We look forward to that. But let's do that. Let's take a break. I got to blow my nose again because my allergies continue to be just absolutely brutal. And then we will be back with hour number 2 on this historic day. Matt Connarton Unleashed. More to come. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everybody. We are well into hour number 2, numero dos, of Matt Connarton Unleashed, and we are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. What a beautiful day it is here. Also on Comcast 97 if you're in Manchester, streaming at WMNHradio.org. And on the Facebook, on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page. And hello to our friends at Raw Talk Online. It is Wednesday, June 16, 2021. I want to remind you, of course, we are proudly sponsored by the Hop Knot in the Brady Sullivan at 1000 Elm Street, right across the street. They are open today. They're open Wednesday through Sunday. They have delicious gourmet pretzels. They have craft beer. Monday, we had Kenny from the Hop Knot on the show with us, and we had a great discussion talking about everything that's going on this weekend for the big Juneteenth celebration and the scavenger hunt. You know, they've teamed up with a series of local businesses right here in downtown Manchester, and they've got some really great stuff planned. So it's going to be awesome. They're such a wonderful business to be partnered with. Great food, great service, and a wonderful family that owns and operates at the Hop Knot. They've got tomorrow night, of course, Thursday nights is trivia night with the great Bill Cini. Friday nights, Grant Lampton plays there and is doing a residency there every Friday night. And he is also volunteering his services for Saturday this year for the Juneteenth celebration. So he'll be playing there Saturday as well. And then they have Penubian drums later in the day. They have Sunday brunch. They've got all kinds of great stuff going on at the Hop Knot. The number to call, 603-250-6007 if you'd like to enter the discussion, 603-250-6007. You can also text us at 617-917-4476. Tweet me at Matt Connarton or send an email to matt@mattconnerton.com. And, of course, you can always interact and opine in the Facebook live chat. But the best thing to do is give us a call at 603-250-6007. I do want to get into some other things today, but I don't want to leave this topic quite yet. If you are just joining us, we've been discussing today the big Biden-Putin summit, the first of what will hopefully be several over the course of the Biden administration. But thehill.com has this up. And this will be helpful, too, to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything that I wanted to mention about this in my analysis of it. But 5 takeaways from the Biden-Putin summit. It says here, the last time President Biden met Russian President Vladimir Putin, he says he told the Russian leader he didn't believe he had a soul. Yeah, by the way, if you don't know that story, when at the time, Vice President Joe Biden, when he met Russian President Vladimir Putin back in 2011, he said to him, he looked him in the eyes and said to him, I don't believe you have a soul. To which Putin apparently replied, well, Mr. Biden, I think you and I understand each other. Now, I think that the soul reference was probably a reference back to when George W. Bush first became president and had his first meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and he claimed to have looked into Putin's eyes and actually seen his soul. So I think what happened is years later, Biden was looking into Putin's eyes and saw nothing and probably thought, well, I think W may have been mistaken. You actually have no soul. President Biden is now the fifth. I mean, this is a testament to Vladimir Putin's staying power. He's been there a long time now, running the show in Russia. President Biden is the fifth U.S. president that Vladimir Putin has had to deal with. So that exchange was just one of the reasons the meeting between the two met in Geneva on Wednesday was so highly anticipated. By the way, Putin was asked about that Biden's infamous comment about, I don't think you have a soul, in that exchange. And Putin says he didn't remember it. So, which is the very diplomatic thing to say. The summit, the final engagement on Biden's week-long trip to Europe, came amid tensions around Ukraine, the treatment of Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny, recent cyber attacks, and allegations of election meddling. Here are the 5 main takeaways. First, a return to pragmatism. The White House was careful to downplay expectations of the summit, stressing there were no deliverables or major breakthroughs expected. So it proved. Biden instead sought to frame the meeting as an exercise in worldly pragmatism. In a news conference afterward, he stressed the importance of, and this is a phrase we've been hearing a lot, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear, strategic stability. By that, he seemed to mean that there should be a workable degree of predictability regarding what Washington or Moscow might do in various scenarios, and an awareness of the red lines for each nation. On cybersecurity, he asserted that any setbacks orchestrated by Russia would be met by a meaningful, if vaguely described, response from the United States. And by the way, I have assumed throughout this when Biden talks about that, and I think Biden did indicate this, something close to it today when talking to the media, that there would be that we would retaliate through cyber attacks and only through cyber attacks. So in other words, I'm pretty sure he addressed this point. So in other words, if we receive a cyber attack from Russia, we will respond in kind, but it's not going to be an escalation militarily. In other words, if there is a cyber attack from Russia that affects our power grid, we're not going to respond by launching a missile, which is good. I'm glad about that. Getting back to this, Biden made clear he and Putin were not miraculously going to fall into lockstep. Rather, he held out the possibility that the Russian leader could burnish his country's reputation over time by staying within international norms. Biden added, quote, "This is not a kumbaya moment, but it's clearly not in anybody's interest, your country or mine, for us to be in a situation where we're in a new Cold War," unquote. And by the way, that also came up during Biden's interaction with the media, or was it Putin who was talking about that specifically, where the phrase Cold War was used? Some people would argue, by the way, that the Cold War never truly ended. Some would argue that it had ended, but it had been restarted as Russia continues to develop new weapons. I didn't hear at all about the hypersonic missile today, so maybe that's not really a thing, and I hope to God it's not. Anyway, such statements were not exactly exciting, but they show Biden trying to walk a fine line. He knows his political and media opponents at home are eager to brand him as weak in his dealings with Putin, as some tonal toughness is required. At the same time, if Biden had contrived a dramatic blow-up, it would have raised new questions about why the U.S. had issued the invite to the summit in the first place. In the end, the event met modest expectations. Putin, for his part, struck a similar tone. He said at his own press conference, which preceded Biden's, quote, "What's the point of keeping score? It makes no sense to try to scare one another," unquote. And by the way, apparently that was something they had to negotiate, that Putin would go first, and then Biden would go second, which I assume everyone wants to go second, right? Or because, then you have the last word on something and it gives you a chance to respond to anything that you're that the first person said, but that was something that was negotiated, that they would have separate news conferences and that Biden would go second. All right, the second takeaway, Capitol riot rears its head. The most contentious subject from the two leaders' dueling news conferences was an unexpected one, the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. By the way, now before I read the rest of this, I don't know why that would be unexpected. Because, I mean, I knew Putin would bring that up because Putin will use whatever he can. It's like, we see a lot of whataboutism in American politics, but it's not only in American politics. In American politics, when Democrats criticize Republicans or Republicans criticize Democrats, the most common response now has become, well, what about when your side did some allegedly equivalent thing, which is usually a false equivalence of some sort, but, well, what about when you guys did such and such? And that's how people defend themselves now. I mean, it's always been that way to some degree, but it's gotten worse than ever. And of course, it is the dumbest, least sophisticated way to argue about politics when everything is all basically, it all comes down to, oh, I know you are, but what am I? But that's, what the political dialogue in our country has become. But it isn't only within the confines of our country. Putin does this constantly. That's why I'm surprised that anyone would be surprised that he would bring up the January 6th insurrection. So, when someone says to Vladimir Putin, well, what about this going on in your country? What about that? This is how you treat protesters. This is how you treat dissidents. No, dissidents. I had it right the first time. This is how you treat political opponents like Alexei Navalny. You've got a lot to answer for, Vladimir Putin. And then Putin responds with, well, what about all the things that go on in your country? And he brings up January 6th, and he brings up riots, and he brings up unrest at a Black Lives Matter protest or whatever it is, whatever he can use. Look in your own backyard, he says. Look at what you've got going on in America. And he tries to sort of paint America as this, this sort of lawless, anarchist, crazy town with a crumbling infrastructure. He's not completely wrong. But that's nothing new to him. He practically invented whataboutism in its current form. His response when trying to defend Russia or trying to defend himself in terms of human rights is always, well, what about America? You've got all these things wrong in your own country. So I don't know why anyone would be surprised that he would bring up January 6th. It says here, Putin raised the issue in response to a question about human rights in Russia. It's a hot topic in general, particularly amid criticism of the Kremlin's treatment of Navalny. Putin reacted in characteristic fashion, drawing attention to U.S. abuses in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yes, again. And he did that during the Bush administration, during the W administration specifically. When it turned out that prisoners were being mistreated in Afghanistan. Remember Janie Engel and all that? Oh, God. I still remember those images. And that's perfect for someone like Putin to try to use against us, or anyone, China or anyone, to try to use against us. Our hands are not clean. Putin also mentioned the continued existence of the prison camp in Guantanamo Bay. But he then drew the insurrection into the same broad argument, saying mildly that, quote, people came to the U.S. Capitol with political demands, unquote. The law enforcement response, he suggested, had been too harsh, which is really a twisting of reality. But the view, but it plays well back home for him, right? See, that's the thing. When Vladimir Putin is doing this, when he's doing his press conference, he wants to look good. Everybody always wants to look good to their domestic audience. Putin is far more concerned, as I guess he should be politically, right? Far more concerned about how he looks to his Russians back home than he is concerned about how he looks to the American audience. And the same for Biden. He should be more concerned about how he looks to a domestic audience than how he looks to the Russians. This view, which replicates the talking points of the most fervent supporters of former President Trump, irked Biden when it was put to him at his news conference. The president said any comparison of January 6th with legitimate protest was ridiculous. Well, I agree. The January 6th rioters, he added, quote, were literally criminals who had broken through a security cordon to assail the Capitol. The third takeaway from today's summit, Biden praised as not Trump. Biden had one big advantage going into Wednesday's summit, the low bar set by his predecessor. Again, we remember Helsinki. When Trump met Putin in Helsinki in 2018, the U.S. president was widely criticized for a craven performance. Trump infamously appeared to take Putin's word over the testimony of U.S. intelligence agencies about whether Russia had meddled in the 2016 election. The late Senator John McCain branded Trump's behavior at the meeting disgraceful. Biden has sought to reassure U.S. allies over the past week that America is back, a clear allusion to the disruption and frequent chaos of the Trump years. Much of the commentary that initially followed Wednesday's summit measured Biden's performance against that of his predecessor. For the most part, Biden earned positive reviews simply by staying within the standard parameters. In doing so, he offered a contrast to Trump's seeming delight in trampling on every line. The fourth takeaway from today, Putin relishes occasion. Putin's desire to flex Russian muscle on the world stage is well known. The Russian president, a KGB agent at the time the Soviet Union crumbled, is sensitive to any diminution of his country's importance. Criticisms of Biden's decision to propose the summit centered on the idea that the event was sure to elevate Putin. The Russian president certainly seemed to relish the spotlight. His lengthy press conference was mostly relaxed and even, on occasion, jocular. While he complained about American double standards on issues like human rights, he was at pains to point out that the atmosphere at his meeting with Biden had been constructive. He said, quote, there was no hostility, quite the contrary, unquote. On several occasions, he praised Biden's experience. Putin's clear enjoyment of the event irked some observers. One critic, the former chess champion Garry Kasparov, complained on MSNBC that Putin, quote, got what he wanted, unquote, simply by virtue of the summit taking place. Now, we'll get to the fifth and final takeaway in this article, but I want to address that. Not so much Garry Kasparov specifically, and if we have time, we'll get to his comments. There was some criticism that Biden, by having this summit with Putin, was in some way legitimizing Putin in a way that was unnecessary, in a way that Putin probably craved. I don't understand that at all. This ain't Kim Jong-un. I remember when Trump went to have his summit with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, or not in North Korea, but sorry, this is yelling outside. Got the windows open. I'm always curious what people are yelling about when they sound aggressive. There was criticism that by Trump, and by the way, I supported Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un. I don't think we got anything out of it. In fact, I think in the long run it may have harmed us because all it did was buy North Korea time to build more nukes. But at the time, I supported the idea. Anyway. But people were critical at the time. Some people were critical, saying that by doing this, you have legitimized Kim Jong-un. You have legitimized his regime by elevating him in a way that he has not previously been elevated. And so he now gets to be seen as a true world leader. An American president actually went and had a summit with him, instead of these six-party talks and whatever, an actual American president sitting down and meeting and negotiating with Kim Jong-un. And like I said, I supported at the time Trump doing that. Would have been nice if there had been some follow through and some actual results from it, but I guess that was too much to ask for. But at the time, I was supportive of Trump doing that. Not unsympathetic, by the way, to the argument that, well, that does help to elevate and legitimize Kim Jong-un in a way that might be unhelpful. I understand that. I understood it at the time. But I also argued that, well, you know what? We're going to have to let him have that. Because this policy of one administration after another just kicking the can down the road while Kim continues to do what he's doing. Somebody outside on the street sounds very, very angry. Wow. I know it's not, I know the mic's not picking it up. You guys can't hear it, but anyway. So, I understood that this was elevating Kim Jong-un, but I thought, well, that's going to be the cost of doing business on this one because this has to be done. But in the case of Vladimir Putin, again, and maybe Gary Kasparov, and if we have time, because I saw in a separate article, we'll look at it if we have time, which we may not. But it may be that in his mind he looks at it in the same way that, as I mentioned earlier, Sager and Jetty looks at it, like Russia's a failing petrol state. What are you doing? And to which I would then respond, as I always do, they have the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons next to the United States in the world. And we've had 4 administrations prior to Biden who have been in office while Putin has been running the show in Russia. So, this had to be done. And to ignore Putin would be to do so at our peril. Ignoring him would make him far more dangerous than any sort of legitimization of him, in my opinion. Ignoring him, he is that much more likely to do things like, try to annex a city like Crimea in Ukraine, which he already did, but try to annex somebody else, try to, or start amassing troops or building these hypersonic weapons or whatever it is. So I think it's very short-sighted to say, well, you can't do this. John Bolton, the other day, former Ambassador Bolton, was talking about how he thought this was too soon and that this was helpful to Putin, that Biden was being unwittingly helpful to Putin by having a summit this soon and, should wait another year or whatever. And it's like, no, you're talking about a nuclear power. Again, the second largest nuclear power in the world after us. No, there is no, let's hold off. No. This has to be done now. If we're going to stabilize things, if we're going to have some normalization here, it's got to be done now. Let's see. The 5th takeaway here, and again, this is from thehill.com. Questions linger about details. The summit provided some positive mood music for Biden and Putin, but it is unclear whether it presages any real changes. An extension of the New START arms reduction treaty had already been agreed in advance of the summit. Putin said the two nations had agreed that their ambassadors, who had been recalled to their home countries this spring, would return to their posts soon. Afterward, the White House issued a statement noting that the two nations, quote, will embark together on an integrated bilateral strategic stability dialogue in the near future that will be deliberate and robust, unquote. The proposal is nebulous, and it could be undone at any moment's notice by anything that raises frictions, such as new cyber attacks. This, in turn, explains Biden's positive but cautious tone. Asked at his news conference whether he trusted Putin, the president pushed back against the terms of the question. He said, quote, "This is not about trust. This is about self-interest and verification of self-interest. Let's see what happens," unquote. Or, to put it another way, as Reagan had said after reaching agreements with Mikhail Gorbachev, trust but verify. But Biden doesn't even want to use the word trust. He's like, and he kind of made the point, again, he made the point when talking to the media that he made the point of Vladimir Putin that our shared success in moving forward in cooperation where we can and coming to some agreements and not launching cyber attacks on each other our shared success helps you at home. It helps you. It helps your country. So that seemed to be how, I think Biden was taking an optimistic but also a realistic tone. Optimistic that, we can all work together, but also realistic that Putin is not going to behave in a way necessarily. Here's a way of putting it. He's not going to behave necessarily in a way that is helpful to the United States in terms of helping both Russia and the United States at the same time. He's going to operate more in a way of doing what is helpful for Russia and hopefully benefits the relationship of Russia and the United States, which thereby benefits Russia. Having a good relationship with the United States is beneficial to Russia. He's not going to do it because he really likes the United States and wants to help us and Russia. He just wants to help Russia, but he's willing to help the relationship to help Russia. So I think that's how Biden was sort of framing that. I do want to look at the Gary Kasparov because I only glanced at it. I want to see exactly, and I think I have, here it is. I want to see exactly what he said. I didn't get a chance to look at exactly what he said. I just know that he was critical of Biden. But I suspect from glancing at this that it's, that it's this sort of dismissive attitude about Russia that I think is so very dangerous. Before we do that, though, before we run out of time, let me give the numbers one more time. If you'd like to join us today on the show, 603-250-6007, 603-250-6007. You can also text me at 617-917-4476. Tweet me at Matt Connarton or send an email to matt@mattconnerton.com. Also, too, just a programming note to remind you, EZG Eric Gagnon will be here with us tomorrow for his entertainment report. So Mediaite reports that Gary Kasparov, outspoken Vladimir Putin critic and chairman of the Human Rights Foundation, said today that President Joe Biden's meeting with the Russian leader should not have happened. Earlier in the day, as the summit got underway, Kasparov said just having the meeting is itself good for Putin and criticized Biden for not taking stronger actions against Russian aggression. Let's see. Here's a couple of tweets from Kasparov, at Kasparov63 on Twitter. EU keeps caving in to Putin without American leadership. Biden was supposed to stop that, even campaigned on it. He called Putin a killer correctly, but looking tough in Geneva or using strong words doesn't matter. Actions matter. And so far, Biden is failing that test. I disagree with that right off the top. I think there have been actions taken. There's been continued sanctions. It's very early, though, also in the Biden presidency. So, you can overshoot your mark and then not be able to get back to a place of diplomacy. So I think Kasparov is being short-sighted here. He also tweeted this: "We know the summit is good for Putin or he wouldn't do it. And everything Trump did was about Trump. But Biden, it's not about him. To give such a gift to a killer who attacked the U.S., you have to make the case to the American people, and he hasn't tried." Again, I disagree. You don't have to make the case to the American people. The American people already know. Russia has next to the United States, Russia has the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world. Everybody knows, everybody understands the importance of having some sort of a stabilized relationship with Russia. There's no case to make. Does he want Joe Biden to make the case that the sky is blue and the grass is green as well? This is basic stuff, dude. Let's see. Kasparov appeared on MSNBC as the world was awaiting Biden's press conference and reiterated that, quote, the idea of inviting Putin was a mistake and it gave Putin a huge platform. The only good news, it was shorter than I expected, so there was not much damage done. But Putin got what he wanted. That's why he was beaming with joy when he left the summit and went into the press conference, unquote. I'm not saying that Kasparov is wrong to say that Vladimir Putin benefited from this in the same way, I suppose, in kind, if not degree, that Kim Jong-un got the benefit of being elevated somewhat by Trump going and meeting with him. But this is very different. Again, Putin is such a direct threat to NATO. We know how he behaves if he's left to go unchecked. And this is not anything new. See, Kasparov is acting like it's the same thing as Trump going to meet with Kim Jong-un. American presidents have been meeting with Russian presidents, and Vladimir Putin specifically, because he's lasted now for 5 American presidential administrations. Every American president meets with Vladimir Putin. Again, he's got a whole lot of nukes. Yes, you have to do it. But this isn't anything new. Kasparov is acting like this is something new. Like Joe Biden just came in and said, you know what, I'm just going to capitulate. I mean, I'd be curious if he had these same criticisms of Trump. I know conservatives like Kasparov, so I don't know, but I'm curious what Kasparov thinks about what Trump did in Helsinki. Andrea Mischel asked Kasparov if there was anything Biden could say, quote, that would make you think this was worth doing. Kasparov said he doubts it. He said, quote, you don't make progress with a thief who robbed your house by talking with him in Geneva. Of course, Putin enjoyed it. And again, I was pleased to see that the meeting was much shorter than expected. Now, it's not about Biden being tough while just putting in an ultimatum. It's about actions. And so far, Biden was failing the test, unquote. I don't understand. I don't understand what Kasparov is looking for here, unless he's looking for, I mean, look, there are people who think that, and maybe this is where Kasparov falls, that the way to deal with Russia, the way to deal with Vladimir Putin is a policy of isolating him. But that isn't going to work here. See, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why. There's multiple reasons, but a big reason why is let's say we try to freeze Russia out. Let's say we don't do any of this. And we try to isolate Putin. And we try to let's say we treat Vladimir Putin the way Gary Kasparov thinks we should be treating Vladimir Putin. Let's say we do that. We don't want anything to do with Putin. We're not going to talk. We're not going to do anything. We're going to ignore him. Russia goes running into the waiting arms of China. Russia continues to expand their relationship with Iran. See, we can... It might work if everyone agreed. We're all going to isolate, because this has been done before historically with other countries. We're all going to isolate Russia. We're all going to freeze them out until they bend to our will. But that won't work for 2 reasons. One, because China's not going to do that. Iran's not going to do that. Hell, there's even Cuba. Maybe they'll rekindle their relationship. I mean, God, I hope not, right? But probably not. But that, and again, they got a whole lot of nuclear weapons. So you can't do it. So Kasparov is adding for a no-win scenario. He's like, I bet him and John Bolton hang out together and talk about how they think that we should just be the a-holes of the world and ignore everyone, and then everyone will just bend to our will because we're the big bad United States. It's not that simple. Chuck Todd asked Kasparov what actually would change Putin's behavior, because what the U.S. had tried before didn't work. Kasparov said one thing Biden could do is, quote, send a message to Putin, is meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. True. That would be seen, but that, again, you don't want to overshoot the mark. That might be seen as a provocation. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's this?
You better start promoting me, see? Or you're going to get into big trouble. You're going to be wearing cement shoes. See there, Matt, there, Connarton?
Oh, my God. Is this James Cagney?
No, this is not James Cagney. This is Tony Maroney. I work down at the docks over there in Brooklyn.
Tony
I kind
Maroney.
of sound like a little bit between Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney, see?
Mhm.
I know you had that James Cagney on there last week. He's a dirty rat, let me tell you that.
My conversation with James Cagney was very strange because he was friendly and complimentary and threatening all at the same time.
Well, I expect from these, he's from New York,
Yeah.
A lot of these guys are wise guys, and some of them are psychopathic and they have mental problems,
Mm-hmm.
But I hope I'm not acting the same way toward you. I heard you're a very, very sexy, handsome man.
Oh, you heard right.
And I saw some pictures of you on Facecrap there, or Facebook, whatever Crazy Joe likes to say it is.
Yes.
And you're looking fantastic, even though you wear the same stuff all the time.
Right, yes. Well, today I'm wearing my wonderful, Jenny had these made. I'm wearing my wonderful Matt Connarton Unleashed shirt, soon to be available online. We've got a bunch of cool stuff happening. But yes, I do have a somewhat limited but consistent wardrobe. That is true.
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, hold on a second. I wanna put you on the Crazy Joe.
Oh.
I came over here to his studio to check out the wonderful work that he's doing with your station. So hold on a second. Hey, Joe, it's Matt on the line. Get over here, you dummy.
Ooh, careful how you talk.
Hey, Matt. Sorry about that. It's one of my guests here today from the old days.
Yeah. I heard he works on the docks.
Yeah, he works. That was his main occupation before he started breaking legs.
Oh my goodness! What is he, like a union boss or something?
Yeah. He's like a union delegate, but he delegates broken legs if people don't do, what they want to do in the union.
Yikes.
So, but he's a good guy. I mean, these Italians, they're good guys.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
It's like the Irish, which I worship, by the way.
Yes. Well, that's fantastic. Yes.
That's my my unofficial Irish name is Joe Blarney.
Joe Blarney?
That's right.
Wow. Oh, very good. I didn't know you had an unofficial Irish name.
Well, I've been dating a lot of Irish girls, and they're the pick of the litter. I mean, they're the pick of my choice. Matt, I'm in love with Irish girls.
Wow.
So when I get famous, maybe they'll all come toward me and visit me. My luxurious penthouse in downtown Manchester. What's the tallest building down there?
What's the tallest building?
Yeah, they have like a penthouse over there.
I think it's the one I'm looking at. I think it's this Brady Sullivan building right across the street from where I am, actually. I think that's the tallest building in Manchester. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Matt, listen, I don't want to take too much of the time because, there was one of your customers out there saying, hey, that damn Joe, he sure knows how to hog up a microphone. I probably did it now, but what the hell? It's almost closing time anyway.
Yes.
And it's time for Eyewitness News.
Eyewitness
from
News.
Channel 7, WABC TV here in New York.
Okay. Wow, what's going on there?
A lot of bad things.
Oh.
Shootings, criminal activity.
Uh-huh.
They just put a curfew on Washington Square Park because of the dance parties they had there.
Really?
And the commotion they were serving, and 8 cops got injured.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
What was that? Did that happen today?
No, that happened. It's been going on for the last couple of weeks. Unruly parties. People dancing on top of cars. It's like it's almost like a riot scene down there.
Oh wow. Well, that's sorry to hear that. I mean, if it devolves into violence, that's never good. I mean, a dance party is one thing, but if there's destruction of property or anything like that, then we got a problem.
Yeah, and they decided to, make a 10 o'clock curfew, which is unprecedented. And,
wow.
The cops are doing their best to quell the situation. The mayor says it might just fizzle out on its own. we'll see what happens, But that's one of the many things happening in New York City. And, of course, some shootings have been taking place. And it's a wild, wild west over there, Matt.
Wild, wild west. Yes. Well, that's any city, unfortunately, is going to have its problems. We have problems like that here. It's cities across America. I do think people are a little bit more aggressive generally than they were during the pandemic. I've had a lot of conversations both on and off air with people about that, especially just driving around. The way people drive now, it's significantly more aggressive. My dad was talking about that the other day when he called in. It's unfortunate. I don't know if it's connected to the pandemic or if it's all in my head or what, but people just seem a bit more aggressive than they used to be.
Now, what do you think that is? Is that because everybody's bugging out that now they restricted the restrictions, or it's just pelt up aggression? I mean, not frustration over the pandemic. I mean, and now it's just I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't quite understand it either. So I don't know. And again, correlation is not causation. So one might not have anything to do with the other, and one might be entirely my perception. But I really don't know. But I just feel like people are a little bit nastier than they used to be.
Hey, Matt, I just got a great idea for your promotion.
Yes.
I think we should make a rock music video with everybody dressing like you.
Oh, that would be very exciting. It's kind of a...
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yes. And it appeals to my narcissism. I think I would enjoy that very much.
Yeah, because they did something like that with AC/DC, but I think we should do it with Matt. I mean, right there in beautiful downtown Manchester, and, put it up on YouTube, and, of course, we got to get all the actors and everything and all the wardrobe.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a snap. I love the idea.
I love it, too.
Mm-hmm.
I love it, too. I think it's going to be fantastic for the station.
Well, here's what I'm going to do. So tomorrow I'll run it by our friend EZG Eric Gagnon when he's here. He's a master of promotion. He made Amanda McCarthy famous. I think he can help us with this.
Absolutely. And he's so handsome, too.
Oh, he is.
And
the sex appeal.
Sometimes, man, I feel like I'm in New Hampshire.
Why? Sometimes I feel like you're in New Hampshire, Joe. Wait, are you hinting at something?
You know what I mean?
Are you on? Was that
I'm
you?
getting to know everybody.
Was that you? I heard yelling on Elm Street earlier. Somebody was using some. Somebody was using some salty language out there. Was that you?
Yeah, well, Matt, come on. You listen, you're a master psychiatrist. You understand me better than I understand myself. And it's wonderful to hear your psychological evaluation of me.
Well, I don't need to do one. I know your name. Your name's Crazy Joe. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know.
Do you know what I'm going to do also? Next time I talk to my therapist again, maybe in a couple weeks or whatever, I'll put her on the phone with you again, and you could interview her again. That was a great segment, and
that would be delightful.
So, everybody seemed to like it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, people did like that. That was it was a nice surprise. Well, Crazy Joe, we are almost out of time, my friend. I got to let you go. Got to wrap up.
Yes, I know. I'm watching my digital clock here. It says 5:57.
Yes. So gotta go.
So
gotta wrap
thank you.
up.
I haven't been on in a few days. I've been working on the production. So
yes,
I'm waving my hand to you, Mr. Matt. Thank you for always your kindness.
All right, Crazy Joe. Thank you. I cannot wait to hear the first show. I'm very excited about it.
Oh my God, you're gonna love it. I'm telling you, you're gonna say, "Boy, this guy's got talent."
All right.
Where was he all my life?
All right. Good.
See you later.
All right, Joe. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Matt.
You got it. Bye-bye. All right, that was our friend Crazy Joe from New York City. We are out of time. Again, thank you all for joining me today. If you missed any part of today's show, it'll be up in just a little bit at WMNHradio.org and at my website, mattconnerton.com as well. I'll be back tomorrow, of course. We have EZG. Eric Gagnon will be joining us in the studio. And don't forget, be back here at 7 a.m. for the morning show with Peter White. And lots of great stuff coming up. Please stop stop in at the Hop Knot, enjoy a pretzel, a delicious beverage, say hello to Kenny and Trudy and everybody. And that's it for us for now. Oh, my allergies. I'm going to go blow my nose again. I'll talk to y'all a little bit later. Bye, everybody.